Yeah.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Let's see this. Yes, is my voice clear? Is it audible? Is my voice clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Fine, then we'll start the class. The topic for the day is about the last chapter with regard to your paper number 2, 10th chapter with regard to paper number 2, which is about contemporary issues. The 10th chapter with paper number 2, contemporary issues. So from the title itself, you can understand it that we are going to talk about contemporary issues. We're going to talk about contemporary present times, current affairs related on it. This whole lesson is all about a lot of current affairs. So more than me teaching, I will be teaching you whatever is there in your syllabus. I will be teaching you that. But UPSC always asks something regarding your current affairs. So, like I said to you in the previous class, I'm expecting something regarding COVID, because in this contemporary issues, there is a topic called as epidemics. So, epidemic, there is a topic. In fact, they have mentioned it clearly as a part of your syllabus. They have given epidemics as a part of your syllabus. In that aspect, maybe I'm expecting something regarding COVID and geography. We will be doing that in detail, but I want your participation also. So what I would suggest you to do is wherever you are coming up with, like in any current affairs magazine, Vision or Bajiram or whatever it is, wherever you come across something that is related to floods, droughts, some urban waste management, make sure that you are taking some notes out of it. Make sure that you are at least you are keeping you take some notes out of it, and you write it in as a part of your regular notebook. So that will be beneficial for you. All right. So that is something that I need from your side. So contemporary issues, mostly current affairs, so your side of involvement with regard to current affairs is also very important. But apart from that, the static portion I will be dealing in the class. And certain things like with regard to Kerala floods happened, no, like in 2018 there was a flood, and very recently last year also we faced a flood. So flood management, urban floods, cloud burst, these things I will be doing in detail. Heat waves I will do, and then something else also I've planned for you. So these things I will be taking. I am preparing notes, maybe in the Saturday's class at least. If not for tomorrow, maybe in the Saturday's class, we will have a detailed discussion about the notes that I have prepared. Right now, we will be starting with the first environmental hazard that's given in your syllabus, which is landslides. So the first thing that you need to know is, what is an environmental hazard? What is an environmental hazard? The first topic is introduction, environmental hazard. Environmental hazard. Any geophysical phenomenon that affects or that causes large scale destruction to physical assets, physical injury to man, or any huge destruction in terms of natural assets. Physical assets, maybe if my building is going to be affected, if my buildings are going to be destroyed, if my life is under threat, or if there is some large scale destruction of a land. Okay, like a landslide, it has destroyed an entire forest, it has destroyed an entire mountain, or something like that. So natural assets, physical assets, or threat to a human life, if that is happening, then that is called as an environmental hazard. That's called as an environmental hazard. So environmental hazards, some of them are natural, some of them it's actually man-made. Natural disasters, earthquakes. Earthquakes are natural disaster, volcanic eruptions, we have landslides, droughts, floods, etc. But what we are increasingly, what we are seeing is, some of these natural disasters are also being made by man. Some of these natural disasters are also happening because of man activities. Like suppose we are constructing a resort in Uttarakhand. See, Uttarakhand is a fragile environment. We are talking about the Himalayan belt. It's a very fragile environment. It's the topography is very rugged. At the same time, it's a tectonically unstable region. Anytime if you're going to construct tourism, if you're going to construct a hotel in the hills of Uttarakhand or in the hills of Western Ghats, two things can happen. One, that ecologically that place will lose its balance. We call it as an ecological imbalance. Some local flora and fauna may be threatened. Human activities, there will be also be threats with regard to the landscape. Okay, so you can see activities like landscape modification, landscape destruction. Previously, it would have been a forest. Because of a new resort in Western Ghats in the Nilgiris mountains, that forest will be cleared and a building will come up. So because of these kinds of activities, increasingly we are witnessing environmental hazards being influenced by man. So human factor is increasingly coming up with regard to any natural hazards. All right, so this is one pattern which we are observing very recently, because of which it is difficult to distinguish either ശരിക്കും ഒരു environmental hazard തന്നെയാണ്. This is a proper human hazard. So it's increasingly becoming very, very difficult. Like last year, there was a flood in Kottayam, and they said that it is because of cloudburst, but it is also because of the improper landscape usage or the improper landscape zoning with regard to humans. We should know where to construct a house. If we are going to construct a house in a hill slope, naturally, when there is a landslide, there is going to be immense loss of life. So what is happening? We cannot distinguish an environmental hazard from a human hazard, a man-made hazard, because the boundary between them, it's becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish. The first environmental hazard that we are taking up is landslides. So what do you mean by a landslide? A rapid movement of the rocks, the soil, and the vegetation which is present in that area downwards or downslope under the influence of gravity is what we call it as landslides. A rapid movement of rocks, the soil structure, the corresponding vegetation which is present in that area, downward movement of all of this under the influence of gravity is what we call it as landslides. The point here is landslides, it may be because of natural agencies, like you have rain becoming a factor, earthquake, very, very importantly, it can become a factor. Then there is another factor also, or there is another cause also. It can be natural or it can be man-made. What happens when man, as I've told you before, when he starts to construct maybe a road or a railway tunnel in a mountain? What happens when man begins to construct a road or a railway tunnel in a mountain? Or what happens if he starts constructing buildings in a hill slope in the name of ecotourism? In the name of ecotourism, if he starts constructing buildings, hotels, resorts, then that will be another disturbance which will lose your base rock system. It will loosen your base rock system. Loose that soil will become very, very loose, and therefore it will be easily falling downwards. So this is how man as well as nature will influence the landslides. So let's now discuss about what are the different factors which are responsible for landslides. Okay, give the heading as factors responsible for landslides. The first one is tectonic movement. Yes, tectonic movements, earthquakes or a volcanic eruption can or a faulting event. Faulting, remember what happens? A fault will develop, so that let's say in a crustal plate, when a fault develops and when two plates move apart, that faulting will lead to tremors, your earthquake tremors, that will lead to landslides. So basically, any form of tectonic activity can lead to landslides. Then you can have some natural events like rainfall and glacier movement. Rainfall and glacier movement, this happens especially when we are talking about the Western Ghats, the northeastern parts of Himalayas, as well as my glaciated mountain ranges of the Himalayas, that will lead to heavy landslides. Mostly these are my natural causes for landslides to occur. And after that, I have to go into the human-based factors. The first one would be mining, quarrying, and road cutting. Mining, quarrying. So what happens here during mining and quarrying? So it's because of excessive mining activities, like you're mining for coal, you're mining for minerals. So that mining, quarrying, both will involve some amount of, not some amount, it will involve blasting of explosives to mine the minerals, to get the minerals, to mine the minerals. So that blasting, that earthquake, I mean, that explosion will lead to some amount of landslides. So mining and quarry. After that, as I've told you, construction of houses, resorts in unstable slopes. Construction of houses and resorts in unstable slopes. So for example, we can talk about the Uttarakhand region, where there is a lot of religious tourism, and Western Ghats region, where there is a lot of ecotourism. Uttarakhand region, where there is a lot of religious tourism. So in that aspect, they are constructing a lot of lodges, resorts in Uttarakhand. Similarly, if I'm talking about down south in Kerala, we are constructing what? We are constructing resorts in the name of ecotourism, and that is also attracting people, and that is actually leading to, that's actually leading to landslides. That's also one of the reasons for landslides. Construction of houses and resorts, lodges, hotels in the name of, give two examples. One case study is about Uttarakhand, another case study is about Kerala, Western Ghats. Okay, that is one thing. Then I have the next reason being deforestation. Deforestation. So what happens in deforestation? Like we indulge in excessive timber harvesting, like timbering. Timber is for use for your regular purposes, your wood, I mean, your construction of houses. Timber, commercial timber is also exploited. So excessive timbering or timber harvesting will lead to slope instability. Deforestation, timber harvesting will lead to slope instability, because remember this, trees, the roots of the trees hold the soil together. When the trees go, what will happen to the soil? The soil will be prone to events of landslide. So deforestation is also one such very important event which can lead to landslides, right? Deforestation and urbanization. You can write it like deforestation and urbanization, and the negative effects of it can lead to landslides. Now, What are the impacts with regard to landslides? Impact with regard to landslides. The next heading is impact with regard to landslides. The first thing is, of course, as you know, it will lead to um, loss of lives and property. Yes, first point, it will lead to loss of life and property. Impact, I'm talking about loss of life and property. Then whatever infrastructure that you have built in that area will also be destroyed. Suppose, let's say that I have constructed a hotel, I've constructed a resort. After landslide, will that resort be there? No. So it will lead to destruction of whatever infrastructure that you have created in the first place. Maybe a railway tunnel, maybe a roadways, maybe an ecotourism hotel. That infrastructure which led to the landslides or which resulted in the landslide, follow me very closely, the infrastructure, maybe a roadways, maybe a railways, which resulted, which in due course of time led to the landslide, will also get destroyed in the landslide. The one event which led to the landslide will also get destroyed by the landslide. Most importantly, very important thing is, it will create significant environmental impacts in the form of topsoil loss, in the form of topsoil erosion. Topsoil is the most fertile portion of the soil, and when that is eroded, that will lead to long-term environmental impacts. Then think about it, think about this. I have erosion, I have landslide which is taking place. Now this landslide, it's not like a small amount of soil which is coming down. It's like a huge mass of soil that is coming up. So what will happen is, along with the trees, along with the buildings, suppose if there is a mountain here, if there is a mountain here, and next to the mountain, here I'm having a lot of houses. I'm having a lot of houses. I'm having a lot of trees. Okay, now as soon as the landslides come, let's say that you have a river here. Now, as soon as these landslides come down, as soon as they come down, what will happen? It will lead to, it will obstruct the river course. It will obstruct the river course, and it will lead to, diversion, changes in the course of the river. It will lead to diversion in the path of the river. It will obstruct the river, it will divert the river, and therefore what will happen? It will lead to flooding of the nearby areas. Landslides, it will also be converted into another natural hazard, which is flooding. It will lead to floods in the nearby areas. Now, these are things which will happen during the landslides. So think of condition, what will happen after the landslides? After the landslides, imagine that condition. First thing is, all this soils, the infrastructure that you have built up, everything is gone, which means that area has to be recreated once more. All the development which happened in that hilly area is gone. So development, whatever that you have spent so far for infrastructure built up, all that infrastructure built up is gone. You have to start from the scratch. You have to start from the scratch. The changes that is being created in the landscape is quite permanent. The changes that it has created in the landscape can be quite permanent. It will take a lot of years of investment and lot of years of hard work to recreate the landscape like what it had been before. Okay, so the time and the cost is incomparable. Next, think about this. Let's say a lot of trees have, now the people might have been dependent on these trees for their livelihood. When the trees are gone, it would lead to pasture loss. Where will they go and get feed for their cattle? Sometimes, what happens, these people will use the grasses which grows on the mountains for feeding their cattle, for feeding their goats or sheep or something like that. So it will lead to pasture loss. It will lead to livelihood loss if they are dependent on the forest which is present in that mountain. It will lead to livelihood loss, agricultural loss, it will lead to food insecurity, and ecologically also, environmentally also, that place would have lost a certain amount of flora in that area, and biodiversity loss also might have happened. Okay, so these are some of the impacts with regard to landslides in general. These are some of the impacts with regard to landslides. Now, let's talk about vulnerability profile of India. Vulnerability profile എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ which are the areas which are prone to landslides? So maybe wait a second. Maybe we can use a map. So give the heading as vulnerability profile of India. Just a second. Can you see this new screen? 1 second. Can you see this India map?
Yes, ma'am.
Huh. Now let's draw this. Now let's draw a map, quick map. We'll draw. Okay. So brush. Okay, look at this. We are drawing the map with regard to vulnerability profiling. So vulnerability profiling, which is those places, which are those places where you have too much of landslides, which is happening. This part of the Northeast, and you have the very important hills here. You have Mizoram, so Mizo Hills, and then you have my Nagaland here, so Naga Hills. So these important ranges, the Dafla, Miri, Mishmi, those hills here, those hills in this region, and the small hills of Mizo Hills, Naga Hills, which happen in these regions. So they are highly prone to, you can take some names also, I'll write it here. Dafla Hills, Miri Hills, Mishmi Hills. So those lie in this towards my Arunachal Pradesh region. And then here I have Naga Hills and here I have Mizo Hills. So those regions are very highly prone to earthquakes, landslides. And then I have see, look at this portion. Look at this portion of Meghalaya. This portion of Meghalaya. Uh, that is not when compared to this other hills of northeast, it's not that vulnerable. ഇനി അതിന് ലാൻഡ്സ്ലൈഡ് സംഭവിക്കത്തില്ല എന്നല്ല പറയുന്നത്, but I'm just telling you, when compared to these northeastern plains, when compared to these northeastern hills, the Meghalaya plateau is pretty much stable. But that also, in that place also, there is a lot of earthquakes which will happen, but in comparison this is much stable. The other region which is very much vulnerable to landslides is this portion, where I will be having my regions of Uttarakhand. I will be having my regions of Uttarakhand regions. Those regions are very, very vulnerable. And then my portions of Himachal Pradesh, hilly portions of Himachal Pradesh plus Uttarakhand, these portions are very, very vulnerable to landslides. And then here, down south, this belt, we call it as the Konkan. This, I don't like this. Wait one second. We call it as the Konkan belt. So this Konkan belt is also, remember the Koina earthquake that we talked about? Once upon a time, we talked about the Koina earthquake. So this Konkan belt is also highly vulnerable to landslides. And then coming on to the Western Ghats portion, my tri-junction point, which is my Nilgiris, the tri-junction with regard to Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka, the Nilgiri hills are also very much vulnerable to landslides. Okay, so there is this tri-junction, the convergence point with regard to the Nilgiri hills, the Cardamom hills, essentially the convergence of my Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats. There you have too much of landslides. So what you can do is in your book, shade these regions. Maybe you can shade these regions, or you can draw a line and mention the mountains. So you can write it as Konkan region. Here you can write it as Nilgiri hills, Cardamom hills. Maybe you can write down the hill names, or you can write down the shade the regions. Anything is fine. All right, so that is my vulnerability mapping. Now coming to mitigation, mitigation strategy. Coming to mitigation strategy, the first thing is mapping the hazard prone regions, like what we have done right now, this vulnerability profiling of India, or mapping the hazard prone regions. We have to know where there is a maximum hazard. We need to know what can be done with regard to risk management in those regions. So first of all, we need to have a proper mapping of those hazard prone areas. And then second thing is land use zonation must be proper. What is land use zonation? Land use, let me write it. Land use zonation, which means I have a land in Western Ghats. I know it is fragile. Why are you going and constructing a resort only in that place? Why not somewhere else? I know a place is not conducive. If I'm going to construct a railway belt, it's that region may be having too much of earthquakes. Why do you go and construct your railway there? Railways is like a huge investment. It's going to be there for a lot of time, for a lot of years. Why do you want to construct a railway belt in a very, very fragile environment? Have a proper land use zonation. Have some proper land use zonation. That's the second point. The third important thing is we need to have proper restrictions on certain land uses. Restrictions like if somebody is acquiring a land, why are they acquiring that land? What is the purpose? Are you going to use it only for that purpose? Proper checks and balances, and at the same time putting restrictions on land uses. And then spreading social awareness. You need to know where there is instability, and if there is any particular reason of that instability, maybe the material can be unstable, like there can be some instability with the material which is present in the soil. Maybe you can take up more and more afforestation techniques. If the soil itself is very unstable, I'm sorry, the soil itself is very unstable, do some afforestation practices so that the trees can hold up the soil, so that the trees can hold up the soil. Then as much as possible, control unsustainable agricultural activities which happen in the hills. The hill people, what they will do is they will always clear a forest, use that land for agriculture, and they will leave it. Now this ingana cut cheythu po, now like you're shifting cultivation. If they keep cutting like this, then that's also a problem. So at the same time, you need to ensure unsustainable agricultural practices are controlled. You have to construct what is called as retaining walls. So what they do is, if they know that this area is unstable, if there is a house that is being constructed, they will have have an underground construction which is very, very strong, so that it will anchor that particular building towards the ground very, very strongly, so that it acts as a resistance. Now there are many, many engineering works, engineering methods to anchor your houses, so use those engineering methods. So the next point is adoption of engineering methods using tie rods and anchoring methods to protect your houses from landslides. Now coming to this retaining walls, they will actually construct a wall that at least can prevent some amount of your landslides from happening. Now this wall will not be of concrete, it will be of a natural material, maybe using bamboo or something. And there will not be one single wall. Suppose if this is a mountain, there will be a wall here, there will be a wall here, there will be continuous walling using some natural material. It can be also from concrete, but it can also be from some natural material like bamboo, so that it will also prevent some amount of landslides from happening. Okay, so these are roughly the ways of mitigating landslides. Okay, so that is it about landslides. Let's move on to the next contemporary disaster that we have, which is earthquakes. Now, what is earthquake? We all know that the release of seismic waves that happen in the Earth's lithosphere. So that will create shaking of the Earth's surface, and that we call it as, and those tremors which is caused, we call it as earthquake. Now, earthquakes, you know, it will not kill people directly. Suppose, let's say that you are in a in an open ground. Why do I tell this point? I will explain. Suppose, let's say that you are in St. Thomas College ground. It's like a big ground, no infrastructure nearby, nothing. It's just a vast open ground space. If earthquake is going to occur, it's not like the earth will split into two and you will go into the middle. No, as long as there is no building, there might be cracks developed, but as long as there is no building surrounding you, you're fine. You will shake your body, that entire earth will shake, but at least if there is no buildings around you, you're fine. So what am I trying to tell you here? Earthquake directly will not kill the people, but it is only the infrastructure, the buildings that is around you, it will fall on you and it will kill people. So the loss is primarily because of concretization of urban areas. The loss that's created, the loss of life that is created because of earthquakes is primarily because of not because of earthquakes directly, but it is an indirect effect of concretization of urban areas. Too many buildings surrounding you, of course, the collapse of the buildings will lead to loss of life. That's one way of looking at it. Now, with respect to Indian subcontinent, now understand something. I will not be uh, going into the Richter scale, Mercalli scale, because I am sure that would have been done in your disaster management classes, and that's not the scope of my lecture. Also, that body waves, surface waves, we have done all of it. We have done all of it when we dealt about the interiors of the Earth's study of the interior of the Earth. That's not my point of discussion. I'm going to discuss about what is this, where geographically, where do you have maximum amount of earthquakes happening with respect to India? With respect to India, where can you expect maximum amount of earthquakes? Now, Indian subcontinent, we have the Himalayan belt, and there is this northward movement of the Indian landmass which is happening. That is, we are moving towards the Eurasian plate also. Now, because of that, there is an increased frequency of earthquake. There is an increased frequency of earthquake that's happening in many parts of North India because of this slow downward movement of, or the slow northward movement of the Indian plate. Where we are getting down thrusted underneath the Eurasian plate. India is being down thrusted under the Eurasian plate. Now, earthquakes with respect to India, it is mostly concentrated in the Himalayan belt region. And based on this, we can divide India, the Indian subcontinent, India, into some five seismic zones, and this has been designed by the Bureau of Indian Standards. Like they have said, like have this as zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, some things like that. Out of it, zone 1 we are not at all bothered because it's of least seismic activity, and from planning perspective, from policy making perspective, we are not worried about the this particular zone 1. The problem starts with zone number 2 onwards. Zone 2, that's said to be the what do you call, the next least active zone, and zone 5 is the most active zone. It's the most active zone. So this entire northeastern region, just a second, the entire northeastern region falls in the zone 5 part. The entire northeastern region falls under the zone 5 part. And then besides that, you have this Uttarakhand, which I mentioned about, where there is a lot of landslides which is happening. So let me go take that map so that it becomes easier for me. Okay. Right. So let's draw this map again. So there is a 5 seismic zones, as I've mentioned to you, and it is important that you need to know that you need to know about how to draw the map with regard to these 5 zones. First of all, let's draw the most important zone, which is my zone 5. The entire northeastern region. Just shade it like that. The entire northeastern region. This is completely filled with what? Zone 5. And then look at this portion, this Uttarakhand region. This is also completely under my zone 5 region. And then I have a small portion of my Bhuj. Have you heard of Bhuj earthquakes and stuff like that? So this portion of Gujarat, this is also under zone 5. And some portions of my Jammu and Kashmir belt, Jammu and Kashmir belt, it is also under zone 5 region. Okay, so in short, if we need to write about zone 5, it is the region where it is having maximum seismic activity. So the entire northeastern region falls under this zone. And then besides the northeast, I also have some portions of Uttarakhand, Gujarat. Uttarakhand, Gujarat, especially remember the Bhuj region. So the Rann of Kutch region of Gujarat, and then Uttarakhand region, and some portions of my Kashmir. And please remember this. This is also under zone 5. Andaman and Nicobar is also under zone 5. And are you guys taking, and now I always have this frequent doubts, have I shared my screen properly? Like that paint screen is there with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So yes, fine. So let's move on to the zone number 4, the next important zone. Delhi falls under this zone. That's why this is more important. Often when we talk about Delhi, there are frequent earthquakes. So Delhi actually falls under zone number 4. So the next zone that we are talking about, zone 4, that includes Delhi, and you have to draw the map like this. Start from this portion that is towards my Punjab Haryana portion, and include Delhi and include all my lower foothill regions with regard to my Himalayas, lower foothill regions of Himalayas. That's the trick here. So include all the portions of my lower foothills of Himalayas. That would completely cover my zone number 4. Okay, so if I have to draw this, this color is zone 4, and then this color is zone 5. Okay, so let me take you through zone 4. So zone 4, whatever portions, see, understand, if there is a zone 5, obviously the one that is nearby it should be zone 4. Either common sense analog, because zone 5 immediately there will not be a zone 1 region. Tectonics, it will gradually fade. It will gradually fade. So this portion, wherever I have this portion, it's all about my zone 4 region. My zone 4 region surrounding the Bhuj area also, I have zone 4. I have zone 4. So it covers most of my northern parts. It covers most of the northern parts, especially Delhi is covered in it, which is very, very important. Delhi is covered in it. Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Haryana, Punjab. If you look at this region, parts of UP, Bihar is there, and parts of Jharkhand. So these are the portions which is completely falling under my, and Kolkata, my West Bengal region. It's also falling under zone 4. And look at this part here, Gujarat, and some portions of Rajasthan will fall under zone number 4. Okay, so that is about it. Now, coming to, we'll start with another different color. Let's start with zone number 3. Zone 3, it's, let me tell you, zone 3 in a cartilum, we'll go with zone 2. Because after destroying zone 2, whatever is left, no, it becomes zone 3. So let's draw zone 2. Again, remember, zone 2 is not that active. Zone 2 is not that active. So the entire most parts of South India it falls under zone 2 region. Most parts of South India falls under zone 2 region. All right. And then you have some portions of my Rajasthan belt, it also falls under zone number 2. So these regions are under zone 2. Okay. So that's about my zone 2 region, and the rest of it, you can say that it is zone 3. Whatever has been not been shaded, it is completely zone 3. Okay, so this is about zone 2 and zone 3. Now, the most important point from policy perspective, I'm telling it from the beginning, Delhi. Delhi's vulnerability is very, very important from the policy making perspective. Why? Because it's a very, very congested city. It is an administrative city. It is a very congested city. And therefore, any amount of seismic activity which is happening here will lead to huge, large scale destruction. And then the next point is, there is something called as National Code of Building Construction. National Building Construction Code, or National Code of Building Construction, which tells how you should be planning a building in terms of environment also, and in terms of seismicity also. Now, this code has been absolutely not followed. And with respect to NDMA guidelines, National Disaster Management Authorities guidelines also, the code with respect to how to construct a building has not been followed. So the laxity, 2-3 points with regard to Delhi. The first thing is, it's as a metro, as a very important metro, as an important administrative center with regard to the country, it is the most congested place. And because of these 3 characters, any seismicity that happens in Delhi is going to have huge implications. And it is also lying in zone number 4, which makes it even more important that we follow all of the rules. But we have the rules only in the textbooks. In reality, the rules are not being followed. NCBC guidelines and NDMA guidelines with regard to building construction is not being kept up. And then there is a laxity in enforcement of carelessness, laxity in the enforcement of seismic code of buildings as stipulated by NDMA. There is a laxity of enforcement of seismic building codes as given by NDMA in this region. And we have a lot of infrastructure built up which is happening in this region. Like what? I have my my administrative, the entire administrative node center on Delhi in Parayanada. So that is there. Apart from that, I have central business districts also, like my Connaught Place. So there are many, many important buildings which makes the region to be very, very risky. In terms of infrastructure also, it is very risky. In terms of environment also, it is very risky. So that's why it's a very high risk area. And also it lies under these 2 regions, zone number 5 and zone number 4. It lies directly under Himalayan thrust fault. So there is intense faulting that is happening with regard to this region, which we call it as the Himalayan thrust fault. And because of all these reasons, the case with Delhi is even more important. All right. Now coming to the next part of it, what is the consequences of earthquakes? What is the consequences of earthquakes? Give that as a heading. Consequences of earthquakes. Number one, the very first thing is, it will lead to a large scale loss of life and property. large scale loss of life and property, huge destruction, and especially the destruction ratio, the destruction effect will be more multiplied in the case of what? In the case of my city centers. If I'm talking about, say, let's say that the disaster like earthquake is going to happen in a village, and an earthquake is going to happen in a town, in a city like Chennai or Delhi, where the disaster, the intensity or the effect of the disaster, where will it be maximum? It will be more maximum in the case of my city centers. So the urban areas are more prone to consequences of disasters than my rural areas. And the economic losses will also be very, very high. The next important point is earthquake can also lead to landslides and avalanches. Landslides and avalanches. Avalanches is your landslide which is happening in the snow-covered mountains. So a glacial slide, a mass of ice, huge mass of ice moving down slope. So a landslide that happens in a snow-covered region is avalanche, right? So it can trigger this. It can trigger as a byproduct. You can have the triggering of avalanches and landslides. Okay, so that's another consequence of earthquakes. It can lead to flooding also. It can lead to floods. Dams can be broken down. Landslides or dam can be broken down. There can be flash floods which can happen. So an earthquake can also lead to land floods. Floods can happen. Earthquakes, if it happens beneath an oceanic basin, it can lead to tsunamis. It can lead to tsunamis. So the best example is the tsunami of 2004, December 2004, that happened in the Indian Ocean. The entire portions of down south in Kanyakumari, Ramanathapuram district, here back in Trivandrum region of Kerala, down south, then you have it in the Kanyakumari, Thoothukudi, Ramanathapuram coast, right up to Odisha. We felt the damages that is caused by the tsunami, the December 2004 tsunami effect. What triggered that tsunami? It's basically an earthquake. So earthquake can also cause these kinds of different counter effects. Okay, so what is the way that you can tackle an earthquake? What's the way of tackling an earthquake? So the first thing is, first of all, we need to have, just like what we dealt before, we need to have a hazard mapping or hazard zonation of different earthquake regions in India, and plan land uses accordingly, and have land use zoning accordingly. Make scientific assessment of the earthquakes, have proper land use zoning practices, have proper hazard mapping of your disasters. Hazard mapping of your disasters. If there is a very vulnerable place, like for example, if your Himalayan region, do not engage in high cost infrastructure build-up in those regions. This is what I mean by, I'm again and again stressing on the term which is land use zoning. What is land use zoning? Suppose if I have a Himalayan region which is prone to earthquakes or landslides or anything, make sure that you are not pumping more and more money into that region and constructing big dams, big what do you call, resorts or railway tunnels. No, it's already a fragile region. Stop constructing. That's what we call it as land use zoning. We need to know where we can construct certain places. All right. Right. Now, the second important thing is, the next point is number 2. Vulnerable community assets. vulnerable community assets. By that, like what I just now told you, like maybe a dam, maybe an railway infrastructure, have a proper planning with it. Make it as much as cost effective and use cost effective technologies. At the same time, make sure that you are not building vulnerable community assets at vulnerable places. Okay, and then the next point is retrofitting of vulnerable buildings. What is retrofitting of vulnerable buildings? See, suppose let's say that or building under that building is like usually if you see some PWD, some age-old what do you call railway quarters? Railway quarters, heard of this? Railway quarters. If you have seen some railway quarters or any other public government work chain or percent of quarters, okay, if you see that the building will look like whether it is going to fall today or tomorrow. That kind of a very shaky, shabby building on it. Usually government quarters will be very poor in condition. So especially many government quarters I've seen, they are very, very poor in condition. Now, these kind of quarters, if it is present in a zone 4 or a zone 5 region, make sure that you retrofit them. Maybe retrofitting, maybe those who have done civil engineering may understand. If there is a crack, maybe have some concrete pumped up into that building. If there is an exposure of the rods, the iron rods which you have used for the building, if there is an exposure of that element, make sure that you construct a pillar next to it which is strong enough, which can support the load of this building. You understand me? Construct a pillar or something, construct a supporting structure for that building which can support the primary building. Suppose you have a building which is very, very shaky or which looks very fragile, have a supporting structure to it. This is retrofitting. There are methods wherein you can pump concrete into cracks and crevices, into cracks in the buildings. Use those technologies. That is retrofitting vulnerable buildings. The next point is have advanced warning systems. For evacuation and for closure of electricity systems and so on. Have advanced warning systems. If there is going to be an earthquake, make sure that you are sending SMSs to people. Government right now sends SMS to people in case of lightning. Have you seen that? Your region, in your place, within the next half an hour, there can be a lightning strike. Please stay indoors. Have you seen such messages? From if you are a BSNL subscriber, you can see such messages. Anybody has seen such messages in your area? There can be a lightning strike in another half an hour. Stay indoors. Do not come outside. Nobody has seen that. No BSNL subscribers here. Maybe your parents at least. Nobody uses BSNL. Really. Surprising. Oh, sure. But usually, no, you've not seen it. Okay. Maybe your area is not prone to lightning, but I don't know. But usually, when back there, when I was in Andhra Pradesh, lightning-based disasters is very high, and cyclone-based disasters are also very high. So they will say in advance that please stay indoors. Your region is going to be affected by a cyclone. There is going to be intense rainfall. Stay indoors. There is going to be intense thunder activity. Stay indoors. So there will be messages like that. Right. So this is what we call it as advanced warning systems. Even in terms of tsunami that was triggered in 2004, if we had a proper warning system, that was the first tsunami that India witnessed. So we did not have a proper idea. But now we are very thorough what we have to do with regard to cyclones. People in Andhra and Odisha, they know what happens when a cyclone, and Kerala also, of course. So cyclone, when it comes, we know, okay, these areas will be flooded. At the same time, we need to stock up parappa, rice, we need to stock up on the basic needs. So these kinds of awareness has developed in the minds of the people, right? So we need to engage in advanced warning for evacuation. We need to engage in advanced warning that can automatically shut down the power systems of those regions. The first disaster that can happen before that disaster comes, the first thing that can happen is like you can be short circuited. Or stray power wire can be lying on the road. You will be walking because of some cyclone, maybe a stray power wire can be lying on the road. People may get easily electrocuted, and the disaster will be even more multiplied when it is a flood. That water is an excellent conductor of electricity. So if there is power in the transport lines, not in transport lines, in your EB lines, if there is power, and if one of the if one of the line gets short circuited, then that entire area will have will be affected. There will be short circuits everywhere. So that's why we need to cut down power systems. The next point is mitigation strategy. The next point is quick assessments of the spread of the damage, quick assessment of the geographical spread of the damage so as to direct rescue operations. Quick assessment of the geographical spread of the damage so as to direct the rescue and the relief operations to that nearby regions. And then we need to engage in, we need to skill the people in terms of radio operations and and at the same time skilling must be done for sensor based designs, sensor designing, etc. Now, what is radio operation? Why do we need to skill people in radio operation? Because when there is a disaster, and I'm sure you must have seen this in your news also, like when Kerala was flooded, everywhere they communicated not using cell phone. They communicated when in inaccessible areas, they communicated using radio jockeys. What do you call that? Your police use that radio jockeys, no, that the radio operators. So that's the mode of communication for most of the people. And then NDMA, your National Disaster Mitigation Act, that has to be strengthened. Proper coordination must be there with regard to your central as well as state government. Central and state government, there should be a proper coordination. And with regard to structural solution, we have to create earthquake resistant buildings. Like Japan is the leader in this. So all of their buildings are not like they're very much earthquake resistant. So such buildings must be using it wherever we have a lot of earthquakes. So broadly, these are the different types of earthquake mitigation strategies. More of this, I'm sure you must have done it in your disaster management classes, like drills. That would another be thing, joint drills, like of different agencies. These drills of different agencies, these people would come, they will teach you. As soon as an earthquake comes, go underneath a table. Angane ottri drills, school drills akka nadathittundu. If you are in an NSS or an NCC, then also you would have had proper training with regard to drills for disaster management, right? So these are certain things that you can implement in your real time also. Right? Apart from this, there is not much. You can strengthen your lecture, or you can strengthen your theory with some NDMA guidelines, or some that disaster management cycle, preparedness, mitigation. That cycle is being taught in disaster management. I'm sure Subin sir would have done a good job in that. Right? So disaster management, I've heard from him that he has done all those things. Right? With regard to disaster management, preparedness, mitigation cycle, earthquake, disaster management, he has done that, right? Borrow that lecture notes, use that lecture notes. Yes, yes, I spoke to Subin sir about it also. So yes, so that's something that you can use for your lectures. That is something that you can use. I'm sorry, not for your lectures, but for your answer writing. Right. Now let's move on to the next important thing that you have, which is drought. Here, I need to stress on some 2-3 aspects which might be important for your prelims also. Drought. In simple terms, drought means condition of dryness. Drought is a condition of dryness. So there is an absence of water, a shortage of water, or a lack of water that can happen in a particular place over a certain period of time. Then we call it as a drought. Drought can be of 2-3 types. First thing is, this is where I'm telling that it will be important for your prelims. The first one is meteorological drought. Meteorological drought. What is meteorological drought? When there is a drought in terms of, or when there is a deficiency in terms of precipitation. Meteorology in Parembo, it is something that is associated with weather, cloud, weather-based conditions. That's what meteorology is all about. So meteorological drought in Parembo, it is a drought. It is a type of drought that can happen because of reduced rainfall condition for a specific period below a specific amount. For a specific period below a specific amount. So what is this specific period? What is the specific amount? Indian Meteorological Department defines meteorological drought like this. So they say a drought, a normal drought or a meteorological drought is a situation. It is a situation when the deficiency of rainfall at a particular place, at a particular meteorological subdivision. Take this down. According to IMD, definition of meteorological drought, according to IMD, a drought that happens when the situation, when the deficiency of rainfall at a meteorological subdivision level, is wait a second. Okay, is less than when the deficiency of rainfall at a meteorological subdivision level is less than 75% of the normal long-term average of that subdivision. Long-term average of that subdivision. Okay, so there is some other definitions also, like for example, if the drought is between 50% to 75%, or if it is greater than 50%, if this meteorological drought is greater than 50%, we term it as a very severe drought. If it is between 26 to 50%, we term it as a moderate meteorological drought. And if it is less than 25%, it is a normal meteorological drought. If it is less than 25%, it is a normal, it's a drought, it is a drought, but it is a normal drought. It is a normal meteorological drought, it becomes a moderate drought, and then finally it becomes a severe. So this is the different types of meteorological droughts in the country. So meteorological drought in Varambo is something that is related to the rainfall distribution pattern. It is related to the rainfall distribution pattern. So what is the causes for meteorological drought to occur? The first thing is when there is a very less amount of monsoonal rainfall, when there is a very poor monsoonal season, or when there is an early withdrawal of monsoons, when there is an early withdrawal of monsoons, or when there is a prolonged break in monsoon, when there is a prolonged break in monsoon. The next thing is hydrological drought. Number 2, hydrological drought. Hydrological drought. So yes, it is the reduction of water levels which is present in the surface. So it might be because of a reduced river flow. It might be because of a reduced stream flow, which will lower the groundwater table also. So what is happening? Hydrological drought can be two-faced. First thing is surface water level will drop. Surface water level will drop. Surface water level will drop, which we call it as surface water drought. Surface water level will drop, like river flow or a stream flow, that will be very less in size. And that will also lead to reduced groundwater table levels, reduced groundwater table level. And that is called as groundwater table drought. So the surface flow, it's dropping, groundwater level flow is also dropping. So this kind of dropping of both these phenomena is what we call it as hydrological drought, a reduction in terms of water levels, which is manifested in terms of surface water level as well as groundwater level. So what is the causes of hydrological drought? What are the causes of hydrological drought? So the first cause is large scale deforestation. When you have deforested, when you have removed the forest, then the soil will not absorb the water. Naturally, the groundwater will reduce. The second reason can be excessive pumping of groundwater. Excessive pumping of groundwater. The third important factor is ecologically hazardous mining activity. Ecologically hazardous mining activity. These three things can lead to hydrological droughts. All right. The third thing is agricultural drought. Agricultural drought. Now, this happens when the soil moisture, and the rainfall are inadequate to support good crops. When the soil moisture and the rainfall is inadequate to support good crops, naturally your agriculture is going to be affected, and that is called as agricultural drought. And why does this happen? Because of inadequate rainfall. And what will be the the effect of this? Agriculture is going to be affected. That's why we call it as an agricultural drought. So what are the causes of agricultural droughts? Number one, excessive use of high yielding variety seeds, because high yielding variety seeds require more and more water, and that will also lead to reduced water in that particular area. Water, if I'm pumping more and more water for agriculture, naturally it will lead to water scarcity in that area. So excessive use of high yielding varieties of seeds. The second thing is change in cropping pattern. We have discussed this so many number of times. Like if I'm cultivating water guzzling crops like rice and sugarcane, I have to supply too much amount of water. So that is also a change in cropping pattern is also another reason for agricultural drought. The last important thing is socio-economic drought. Now, this is a drought which is going to affect man directly. The last one is socio-economic drought. Economic drought. And this is going to affect man directly because the productivity of agricultural fields will come down. Productivity will come down. Crop failure will happen. It will lead to food insecurity, famine, livelihood losses. At the same time, it will also lead to debt trap for farmers. And naturally, it's a crisis for farming, for farmers in general. It's a crisis for farmers in general, and farmer suicide will increase. So this is a socio-economic drought. It also has an economic aspect to it. All right, and this we are witnessing it increasingly. We are witnessing socio-economic droughts increasingly. Right. So now these three droughts, the first one, meteorological drought, hydrological drought, and agricultural drought. This is very, very important from the perspective of prelims. From the perspective of prelims, it is very, very important. In fact, again, I'm repeating, the last 1 month or from the months of January, towards the end of January, whatever I have discussed, my entire discussion, even if you have paid some attention to it, I'm sure you could have seen certain questions getting replicated even in your prelims test series, right? Yes or no? Then when I saw the questions, like many questions are getting repeated, like with respect to some of the topics that we have generally discussed. So there is an increasing tendency of questions being asked from geography. So probably if you have paid some attention with regard to Indian geography classes, it would have been beneficial even for prelims. And one such topic is my drought. Ecological drought, hydrological drought. This is a very, very often asked questions in your test series. Right. Now let's move on. The areas which is very broadly affected by droughts in our country. The areas which is broadly affected by droughts in the country. Most drought prone regions are the northwestern region. That's the first thing, my arid portions of Rajasthan. So my northwestern portions of Rajasthan, which includes my my Kutch region, my Ran of Kutch region, Thar Desert region, as well as the semi-arid regions of Rajasthan. That belt, it's very much increasingly affected by droughts, and then followed by that, my interior portions of Peninsula Plateau. My interior portions of Peninsula Plateau is also increasingly affected by floods. And then I have my regions of that cotton belt regions. So let's take our map. And if you have to plot the map, um, okay, so fine. So look at this portion. Look at this portion that I have This is my most affected portion in terms of drought. And then the interior portions of plateau. Okay, so these are the portions, the peninsula region, especially my cotton belt or the Telangana region, Andhra Pradesh, interiors of Karnataka, and Marathwada, Vidarbha regions of Madhya Pradesh. I'm sorry, of Maharashtra. These are the important areas which will be affected by drought. Very, very highly prone regions are. These are the highly prone regions with respect to drought conditions. And then some of the other regions, some of the other regions increasingly that's facing some amount of drought, or you can say some critical regions. You can say it as a critical region. The first region is portions of Delhi and Haryana. Portions of Delhi and Haryana during intense summer conditions, they are facing heat waves. They are facing heat waves which are triggering drought-like conditions. Point number one. The second point is places of Cherrapunji, in spite of Cherrapunji in Meghalaya. So places of Cherrapunji in Meghalaya, in spite of receiving the highest amount of rainfall in India, it is also facing drought conditions due to the soil structure and due to the topographical conditions. And then my parts of the third point, parts of Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Maharashtra, Manipur, Mizoram, and Tripura also come under water stressed conditions. Also come under water stressed conditions. Put this within double quotes, water stressed conditions. So we are facing a situation in which there is very, very severe water scarcity or water stress in these areas. Then take down the next point. Take down the next point. Take down the next point. The next thing is 90% of drinking water in urban areas are met from groundwater extraction. Full stop. Technology development in deep drilling and pumping methods, and populist policies. Populist policies എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ people friendly policies ആണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ people എന്താ വേണ്ടത്? Populist policies. People എന്താ വേണ്ടത്? We need electricity for agriculture. Agriculture is our important need. Suppose if we are going to say tomorrow, if we are going to say that whatever electricity that farmers are using for agriculture, we are going to tax it. That government is doomed. It will not come to power from the next election onwards. Whereas BJP is going to put up a thing like this, Congress will come to power. So the thing is, populist policies, populist pressure. What was I telling you? Technology development in deep drilling and pumping methods and populist policies of free or subsidized electricity for irrigation purposes have contributed greatly to the massive exploitation of groundwater, especially in the states of Punjab, Haryana, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal. In India, with respect to groundwater, See, now one point alone I will explain here. Remember this. It may sound simple, but it's quite interesting. Interesting. It's important also. The thing is, groundwater. Where do you get it? Underneath your house. If I have to put a bore well, I'm just putting a bore well using my own resources. I take money. I use my money. Put a bore well, drill a bore well, use the water. That's it. That's it. That's all about it. I'm not getting any permission, or nor I'm not paying any taxes for exploiting the groundwater, right? But groundwater, just like your public tap water, uh, it can be taxable. It can be taxable, right? Groundwater is a common resource, but we are not paying any taxes for groundwater. So the point is, with respect to India, with respect to groundwater, there is the ownership rights. The ownership rights of groundwater lies to the owner of the land. The ownership rights of the groundwater lies with the owner of the land, and there is no legal limit on the volume of water that a particular owner can extract. There is no legal limit of the volume of water that a landowner can extract. Therefore, it is leading to unregulated exploitation of groundwater. All right. So the next point is urban areas of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, urban areas of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh is seeing increasing groundwater-based drought, which is my hydrological drought, because of the excessive tapping of groundwater. The next point is industries. Apart from agriculture, industries also tap groundwater. So the next point is industries also exploit groundwater in an unregulated manner. This has resulted in contamination of groundwater by heavy metals like fluoride and arsenic pollution. By fluoride and arsenic, fluoride and arsenic pollution. So we have already discussed about seawater transgression towards this portion of West Bengal. And what did I say? Seawater transgresses Ambo. Salinity of that area will increase. It will also lead to heavy metal pollution in those regions, right? So that is also happening because groundwater exploit because of capillarity action. Salt pans will be deposited on the surface. At the same time, I will also be having heavy metal pollution. Next point is, what increases the impact of the drought is, the impact of drought is the failure on the part of the government to respond to the crisis. The action plan, the long-term action plan with respect to management of drought should be based on setting up climate resilient agricultural practices following the principles of climate resilient agricultural practices, following the methods of agroclimatic regionalization, during policy making. Next point, NDMA guidelines, including vulnerability profiles for regions, communities, must be created NDMA guidelines with vulnerability profiles for regions, communities must be created. Next point, ICT, information and communication technology, must be used for sharing of real-time drought-related information. Water resource management in the form of rainwater harvesting and traditional water management practices like uh, take down traditional water management practices like creating johards, JOHAD, johards, of Rajasthan. Johards, maybe in the bracket you can write Rajasthan. Johards, Rajasthan. Johards, no remember, Johards, I will explain, but just now write it. Johards, Rajasthan. Zing of Ladakh. Nalas of Madhya Pradesh. Floods of Maharashtra. Must be practiced. So what have you written? Traditional water harvesting practices or traditional water management practices like Johards of Rajasthan, Zing of Ladakh, Nalas of Madhya Pradesh, Floods of Maharashtra must be practiced. So what is all of this? The first thing is Johards na Parembo. Johards are nothing but or embankment. Suppose let's say that a river is flowing. Now let me share another screen. Okay, so some river is flowing and it's a very seasonal river. So what you do is, in the case of summers, it will dry up. In the case of monsoons, it will start to flood. So what you have to do is you have to construct an embankment, a kind of a small bank, and divert the river for maybe something else. When there is an excess of river, when there is an excess flow in the river, water will enter into the johad and it will go into maybe a farm nearby or maybe for the nearby town or something. So this is what we call it as a johad. So these things like johads or nallas, everything have the similar meaning. So these things have to be constructed as what is popularly called as these will act as check dams. These will act as check dams. So these things have to be constructed. Now in Meghalaya, we have what is called as, in Meghalaya, we have what is called as bamboo lift irrigation system, or bamboo irrigation system. If there is a river, you can even Google this. There will be a bamboo pipe, and all bamboo pipes there will not be one bamboo, many bamboos will be connected together, and water from one region to another region will be carried using these bamboo pipes. So this is one way in which Meghalaya water harvesting is being done. Water harvesting is being done. Water harvesting for irrigation is being done through these practices. So these kinds of check dams, the traditional water management practices, must be set up. And another thing is, we can take the next point, maybe you can take as a part of running notes. We can take examples from Indus Valley civilization, especially Dholavira. Dholavira is an excellent example of water harvesting practices, water management or water harvesting practices. So we can take examples from the Indus habitats, which is like my Dholavira, sites of Dholavira, where they have several reservoirs to collect the monsoon waters, and there is excellent drainage systems also. So these are some things that you can write in your answers. Okay, and then more or less you can take down some more points also. Cutting down subsidies of power, massive awareness campaigns, massive awareness campaigns to conserve water. More or less, these points you can add as a part of controlling droughts and having proper water management practices. Someone has asked me something. There is artificial glacier creation in Ladakh. Is that a water management practice? I do not know about this artificial glacier, but if there is something, if it is quoted in newspaper that it is a water management practice, you can write that as a case study. That will be an example of your case study.
ഞാനത് യൂട്യൂബിൽ നിന്ന് കണ്ടതാണ്. ലഡാക്കിന്റെ അവിടെ വെള്ളത്തിന് ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുള്ളൂ. അപ്പം ഒരാൾ കണ്ടുപിടിച്ചൊരു ഇതാണ്, അതായത് ഒരു കമ്പേ കെട്ടിയിട്ട് പൈപ്പ് വെച്ചിട്ട് തണുപ്പുള്ള സമയത്ത് വെള്ളം ചീറ്റിക്കും. അന്നേരം അത് ഐസായിട്ട് മാറും. ആ സമയത്ത് വേനലാവുമ്പോ അത് ഒരുക്കിയിട്ട് വെള്ളം യൂട്യൂബിൽ സെർച്ച് ചെയ്ത്.
Maybe that you can write as a case study as an example. You can write it. That's also an example that you can write. Okay, so that is it with regard to droughts. Now we have some 15 more minutes. Let me take the next thing that we have. Tsunami. We will take up tsunami. So tsunami, I'm sure you might have read it as a part of your disaster management also. But remember, for a tsunami to occur, there should be an earthquake. There should be some disturbance, underground tremors that can happen. So there should be some amount of tectonic disturbance. It can be anything. It can be a volcano. It can be an earthquake or anything. But there should be there should be a certain degree of tectonic seismic disturbance. All right, that's the first thing. The second thing is height of the tsunami wave. This is something that you need to understand. Height of the tsunami wave, it rapidly increases as it approaches towards the beaches, that is towards my land areas. It increases upon reaching the land areas. As it approaches the land areas, or as it approaches the shore regions, the height of the wave rapidly increases. But the velocity of the wave, it drops, and the height increases but the velocity drops. So that's something that is also something that you need to know. And another thing is the speed of the tsunami is also directly related to the depth of the water. So depth of the water, it's also directly related to the depth of the water. Like as and when the depth is more, the speed is also pretty high. The speed is also pretty high. So that's another point. So roughly these are some things, and especially remember this point alone. That is, this is common sense. Like when the wave is deep inside the ocean, you cannot see the wave is very tall, but as it approaches the coast, നമുക്ക് wave ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു shape ആയി കഴിയും. So the height of the wave, this is what we call it as the height of the wave. The height of the wave keeps on increasing as it approaches the coast. And right now, what are the causes of tsunami? We have earthquakes, we have maybe volcano, some tremor, some seismic activity must occur. So at present we have lots of tsunami early warning system, um, because the only way that we can understand the effects of a tsunami is by having a tsunami warning system. So there are many regional tsunami warning system, there are many international tsunami warning system. So even with regard to Indian Ocean, we have an Indian tsunami early warning systems, a center. It's called as Indian Tsunami Early Warning Center. Indian Tsunami Early Warning Center, or an early warning system that is being operated and established by the INCOIS. Heard of INCOIS? Indian National Center for Ocean Information Sciences. Indian National Center for Ocean Information Sciences, which is an autonomous body under Ministry of Earth Sciences. Ministry of Earth Sciences. It's been operated by INCOIS. It's been established by Ministry of Earth Sciences. So any triggering factor, be it an earthquake or be it my tsunamis, it will be recorded in the seabed. Inside the seabed here, there will be some couple of sensors. They will track the changes in the seismicity. They will beam it to a transmitter which will be present in the surface. There will be a transmitter which will be present in the surface. Can you hear me now? Something happened. He lost the connection in between. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay, fine. We will wind up the class very soon because my internet is bad. So class, what is there is a sense which is a floating body. That floating body will beam it to the ground state. So if I have to draw it as an image, I can draw the image like I think the net issues will persist. We will wind up the class here. Nothing more with regard to tsunami system. Tsunami system, there is nothing more. Whatever you have learned it in your disaster management classes, it is applicable here also, right? We will have an offline class tomorrow. We will continue the rest of this in the offline class. All right, we will continue in the offline class. Thank you so much. We are winding up the class here. If there is any doubts here, maybe you can ask me now. And one more thing, that is my whatever we have dealt here. No, let me share the screen. Whatever we have shared here, Johards, Zing, Nalas, FUDs, these are important from match the following perspective. Water harvesting and the corresponding states. You can be asked to match the following. So this is also important from prelims perspective. Any other doubts that you have? If not, we can start the class tomorrow. We have a class tomorrow at 1:30. Yes. Any doubts in today's class? Anything that needs to be sorted out? Maybe if you have anything else, you can stay online, you can ask me, or you can meet me. And again, I'm telling you, if there is, first of all, can you hear my voice? Hello, are there people outside? Yes, perfect. Yes, fine. So as I've told you before, any doubts that is there with regard to the subject, even after the class gets over, you can ask me. Like, namaka class theernalam, you can connect with me. I've given you my number. You can ask me doubts even after geography optional is over, even after the mains have started or something. If you want to share your answers, I'm very much open to have some answers also. Like after prelims, if you want to have some answers being written, you can share the answers. And if you have any doubts, you can approach me. So you know my place. Any doubts with regard to the subjects? Fine. We are winding up the class now. We will have the class tomorrow. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.